Hello and welcome to Uncle Cthulhu Talks. So this is going to be the name of my segment where I'm talking to a guest or talking to the camera about stuff rather than reviewing something. So today I've got David.
Hello.
And David's my long-term Game of Thrones opponent. He lives in the same village as me. So we meet up. We try and do it once a fortnight. Sometimes real life gets in the way and we have a night. So we've actually had a few games tonight as well. So David's played Game of Thrones with me. We had about 2 years worth of first edition.
I think so, yeah.
And then whatever second edition's been. Now, the reason I want to get David on the talking tonight is throughout all that time he's been a House Martel Loyalist, for want of a better term. Well, it started off a bit Baratheon, but then it was all Martel.
After that, yeah.
So I thought I'd ask you a bit about your Thrones background and get you talking about Martel and where they are at the moment. So, the thing about Martel, I think of Game of Thrones. So what appeals to you about Game of Thrones?
So Game of Thrones, the card game, what always appealed to me was not just the competitive edge, but the skill involved with deck building.
Sorry, the camera's just falling down there. Sorry, there you are, that's better.
So not just the competitive edge, but the skill involved in deck building, the planning, organisation, that kind of side of things. So it wasn't just the characters or the story or the setting that appealed to me. It was more the game mechanics and the deck building.
Now, had you much experience with card games before Game of Thrones?
No, not at all. And it was thanks to Stephen here that I became a Game of Thrones card game fan. And I had no previous experience with any other card game at all beyond playing cards.
And well, poker. Have you done any other card games since? Have you dipped your toes into Magic, say, or any of those?
No, I the most I've got with Magic is to think about getting into it, but I was largely put off by the expense. But Arkham Horror, there's been a wee bit of that going on as well. But of course, even though they're both living card games, quite different, because you're not under the same pressure to continually be buying chapter packs and so on. So two quite different games, one that you kind of have to keep up with the meta as it is, whereas with Arkham Horror you can play more at your ease.
So, came tonight to talk about Martel. Yeah. So, for you, what's the appeal of House Martel?
So, Martel, I like the idea of being in control of a house that is losing in order to win. So that's what appealed to me about them was not the idea of storming into the lead and leading from the front and winning from the front. I always liked the idea of a house that allowed you to win from being behind to begin with, and basically punishing your opponent for any kind of short or long term
doing anything
advantage. Yeah, basically. So the idea of suffering a wee bit, being accepting some measure of defeat before hopefully pulling off some kind of win.
So obviously you played Martel, say about 5 years, or say 5 years.
So, yeah.
So what has been your experience with Martel in competitive play, and what sort of amount of games do you get up to?
In competitive play, I think except for one game some years ago, it's always been Martel that I've taken to any kind of competitive event, whether it's been a games night kit or a store championship or regional. I think now they stand a better chance competitively than they did. They weren't good they weren't competitive out of the core set. There was potential there, but in the beginning of second edition at least,
they were really good banner house, I felt.
Yeah, they were for. I think my first competitive deck that I built was Martel Rose, because back in the days of the core set, for Martel to be competitive, you really had to have something that was going to bring you renown.
A victory condition,
yeah. Some kind of win condition.
I think was it Tyrell's son I played.
Probably
That I won the Star Championship or Games Night kit with.
Yeah. So either
that was certainly in the early days.
Yeah, so they were a good banner house, and for them for you to win with them as a main house, you really had to banner something in, and Tyrell was a good option in the early days.
Yeah, Tyrell were a great banner house before they got feet of their own.
Yeah, because you had Randall and you had the Knight of Flowers, you could just to give you simple renown, which Martel lacked.
That's my favourite event. Still got my favourite event.
Yeah.
Ben the Maiden Fair. Love it.
It's a good filtering event.
So Martel then. So you've talked a bit about the Martel in the meta as was. Where are they in the current meta?
And I mean, I don't make it to as many competitive events as I would like. So my view on where they are in the current meta is mainly just down to where I see them rather than through experience.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
But I think
you also play a lot in the Iron Throne though as well.
Oh yeah. But I think competitively they are far better than they used to be. Mainly thanks to the Wars to Come agenda. I think that's given them a huge boost because it's taken a lot of cards that were fairly benign and beginning to become binder fodder, and has given them a new lease of life. So Dorn's Game has really come back and given Martel a genuine rush option. So depending on the build for Martel Wars, that core set card combined with others has given them a more competitive edge. But having said that, they still have to work to get a victory. Even though they're more competitive, they still have to work at it. But then for me as a Martel player, that doesn't really matter because working at a win is part of what makes Martel an enjoyable house to play.
Well, he calls it thinking.
Yeah, and that's it. It wouldn't. I mean, a Martel victory without some thinking involved would be a bit of a hollow victory. Yeah.
It's almost like the Triple H of houses. It's a cerebral assassin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the last regional I was at, it was the event you just mentioned.
The
Intrigue one, win by Intrigue.
Oh, Dorn's Game.
Yeah. Dorn's Game. That was a finisher in the 3 games I lost.
Yeah. And it's big because the further you go into the game, if you're playing against a Martel Wars deck, the further you go into the game without meeting your own win condition, the more dangerous your Martel opponent becomes, particularly if they have a strong intrigue presence on the board. So that's what makes them dangerous, but at the same time, they don't have lots of renowned characters, so they can't necessarily force the win. They still have to manipulate and control and dictate the board before they pull off their win condition.
Yeah, it's almost like building to the point where you springboard to victory rather than it just comes.
Yeah. Unless they, it's not like maybe a Stark board where they can just throw renown and force the victory. They still have to a point, set it up. And if you're savvy with Martel, then you will see it coming.
Yeah.
And you can act appropriately.
So we've talked a bit about what's to come. What do you think the other key builds out of Martel are?
I would say Martel Wolf certainly is still a very aggressive attrition-based build.
So what sort of stuff you want to do with Martel Wolf?
So Martel Wolf is all about keeping the board small, controlling what happens in the board through just basically keeping the board small. So your key cards in that build are going to be Ward, your Venomous Blade, and quite recently Ramsay Snow. So you can produce a very cruel deck depending on just how far you want to push the attrition. I mean, there's different variations of Martel Wolf.
Yep.
The most recent one I ran probably went too far with reset. Some Martel Wolf goes the whole hog with reset, with Varus and Valar Dohaeris and Valar Morghulis. Other Martel Wolf builds that I've seen pull back on the reset and focus more on attrition.
Yep.
And just controlling the board through military claim and other targeted kill. So it's with that build, it's about how far do you push the reset, how far do you push the attrition.
And you took Martel Wolf to the regional and you made the cut?
I made the cut, and it was also, I won my first store championship with Martel Wolf.
Which is Common Ground? No?
Common Ground Games, yep. That build was more a kind of Varus reset build. But the one that I took to 8th place in the Scottish Regional was one that I really pushed the reset, which would have worked if the rest of the field had not been Martel orientated.
Yep.
Because my build up against other builds that were doing the same thing or similar just didn't have the impact. I was gambling more on a field that was more Tyrell, Stark, Greyjoy, that were looking for big board presence.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's Martel Wolf, which is very effective and quite a cruel deck to face. Martel Stag used to be quite significant, but I think maybe not as powerful as it was because it relies a lot on, you know, the Cancer Lancer type deck. Although you can, the deck that I was going to play against Stephen tonight but decided against, the Bastard deck.
I ran a Bastard deck as well.
Yeah.
The Bastard deck became the Tyrell at the start.
Yeah, and it's it basically takes the same principle of the Cancer Lancer deck, but adds to it with the added tech that you get through the Bastard Viper, which is the best art.
And you get to say bastard a lot, which
Yeah.
is bastard and
and dirty bastard and
not a bad thing at all.
yeah. So he's good, but you have to build around him. And I think what the Stag banner brings is the Bastard of Nightsong.
Yeah.
And if things come together in the right way, you can get the Bastard of Nightsong. You can have your Clash of Kings for your plot in that turn. Table and chair, there can be a lot of moving power from, you know, one faction card to the other. So I found that to be, I've had a lot of very good games, you know, very successful games in Iron Throne with that, yet to be tested in an actual
In the flesh.
person to person game.
So what about icon removal? Is that a thing at the moment with Martel?
I would like it to be a thing. I think they probably missing a few pieces. I think the icon removal Viper is good but very niche.
Yep.
He needs a very specific build that really commits to icon removal to make it work. Because otherwise, if he doesn't do what it says on the card, he's basically a 6-cost Tricon Renown character, which is okay, but you know, you're paying that amount of gold for a character that's just basically Renown.
Yeah.
For him to really shine, you have to basically be prepared to forego a lot of the other Martel tech that you love, and commit your deck to icon removal. So it's a thing, but I think maybe if they had a plot, if they had a loyal plot,
Like an icon. Okay.
that helped them with that.
So you almost guarantee it.
Yep, and maybe if they brought back one of the first edition locations, because at the moment the only locations that, well, they've got one, I mean, at Starfall, the 3-cost locations,
Yeah.
fairly decent. But what they really want back, what I want back, is the Scourge.
A lot of first edition Martel players want back their
Yeah.
Scourge.
So for those of you who don't know anything about the Scourge was a 2-cost location that allowed you to remove all 3 icons from a character, and then your opponent would be able to regain those icons by discarding cards. So, yes, you could trigger the Scourge and still end up with said character with all three icons, but at the costly expense of cards out of hand. So if that icon or if that location, or similar was to come back, I think that would really give the icon removal deck a bit of an edge. They've got a lot of icon removal at the moment, but it tends to be there as a kind of sub-theme of most other Martel builds.
That's a nice wee cherry on the cake. So you've talked about one of your favourite first edition cards. What do you think your top three Martel cards are in second at the moment?
At the moment, I think...
Don't have to be the best. What's your favourite?
Well, I think starting with Dorn, initially when people saw it, I think 4 cost put people off, but very, very quickly, I think Martel players and opponents of Martel realised just how potent a card it was.
Keeps it safe as well, 4 cost.
Yep, safe for most things, although, just as a side note, with the rise of Dorn also came the rise of Seized by the Guard. Again, a card that, to begin with, when it was reviewed, was seen as being a bit mediocre, but I think Dorn and actually the new wall has made Seized by the Guard not, I wouldn't say a go-to must-have card, but it's certainly there on your radar.
I think you've got to have location control right now.
Yeah, and I think if you're not bannering Wolf, then Seized by the Guard is your next best option. So Dorn, definitely, because it's unlike Secret Schemes, and that I would say is my second favourite card, but they really bring 2 different methods of card draw. So Dorn brings you consistency of card draw, whereas Secret Schemes gives you the burst of card draw. Now, if you've got deck space and with the best will in the world, you would want to run both, but not all builds will allow space for that. One build I have at the moment, which is a 75 card build, which I played tonight, it runs both, because with that much draw, I can get through a 75 card deck.
Well, between that and my pillage, there's about 30-40 cards in your discard pile.
Yeah.
And you playing events and stuff as well, it wasn't a passive. Yeah.
And it allows, so Dorn and Secret Schemes together, so I'd say that those are my 2 favourite cards. The amount of draw is just quite incredible. And put those 2 together with the Wars to Come, which I would say is, even though it's not a Martel card, it's an agenda that I think was built with Martel in mind.
Especially with a Prince Dorn's Behest.
Prince Dorn's Behest, which just fuels the Wars to Come. But what I like about the Wars to Come is that it creates options for Martel. There's maybe the more obvious approach with Dorn's Game, Rucasso, plots in the used pile. So there's those 3. So I would say Dorn, Secret Schemes, and the Wars to Come.
Wars to Come.
Yeah.
So there's just been the new demo decks come out.
Yeah.
Or not like introductory decks, and there's probably a few new people thinking about playing Martel. What would be your advice for a person new to Martel?
If you're new to Martel, I think make sure that you've at least got the basic mechanics of the game pretty secure, because most people venturing into Martel, they'll have wanted to have played games with other houses where maybe the game mechanics and gameplay is a bit more straightforward. So I certainly wouldn't suggest that Martel is a house to start with. But if you're new to Martel, you have to accept that to win with Martel, you have to first learn to lose. And obviously I mean that in a calculated sense, but you have to accept that to win with Martel most of the time, unless you're playing a specific rush build with Dorn's Game and so on, there will be a period where you're likely to be behind. So to help you kind of learn that, you really want to investigate and do a bit of research into the lose to win mechanic of House Martel and look at the range of cards that will facilitate that. And once you realise what's on offer, you realise that actually losing is not too much of a bad thing with Martel. Obviously, you still have to construct a deck that will allow you to then recover from losing.
Know where set up that board so you know where you're going to win from.
Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean Dorn's game all the time, because it's hard to construct a deck where you are always losing and triggering your lose to win tech, but also including cards that allow you to rush to win at the end. It's hard with the range of cards that Martel has got. It's hard to accommodate both in the one deck.
So I quite like the boneware for that.
Yeah,
kind of covers both. It just ticks over nicely.
Yeah, it does. And if you include that with other cards like Burning on the Sand, for example, where you're cancelling claim. Okay, your opponent gains 1 for unopposed, but you're reducing claim to 0 and also getting your boneware triggers.
So one of the things I've found, obviously I've played against Martel a lot, is generally I go to tournaments and I'm pretty good at facing Martel players down. Not the last one, well actually the Costas and was it Sam from Ireland who won it 1 and 2, played Martel great and they outplayed us. But certainly I'm a much better player for playing regularly against Martel.
Yep.
And my top tip for playing against Martel is you've got to work out when the lose text on the board, if the challenge you're going to make is going to be worth it. So tonight, I think I was only, for a few turns, I was only doing like 1 challenge, but it was 2 pillage with a King Assault and Rock on. So I was getting the bonus, and one of the pillages was Triss, so I was able to knock stuff out your deck. And often you've gone to a tournament, you come back and say, I played this guy, and you just had no idea about Martel, and he blundered into a whole load of stuff. So, to wrap up tonight, what do you think people should watch out for if they're playing up against Martel at tournaments? Maybe if they haven't had much experience playing against them. So,
if you're playing against Martel, they're more often than not going to want to go second. And if they're angling to go second, if their plot choices are enabling that, that usually means that they're trying to trigger either stuff that's on the board or stuff that's in their hand, because quite a lot of Martel tech works through second player. So if you can, and it doesn't always work because of newer cards that Martel have got, but I suppose 2/3 of the time making Martel go first doesn't help them. It usually works against what they're trying to do. Having said that, some of the cards from the deluxe box are giving Martel good go first options. So I would suggest that you check out Ilaria Sand and the Bastard Viper, because those are 2 extremely good go first cards for Martel. So the way the card pool is going, more often than not, you want to make Martel player go first. But I think as more cards come out, that will become not as attractive as it once was. You also want to look out for the Martel player that has gold.
Tons of gold.
Yeah, particularly if they're sitting on 2 gold. But also remember that Martel has other ways of producing gold surprisingly and during the challenges phase. So if the Martel player is quite happy to sit back on at least 2 gold, then you might want to consider your options during challenges quite carefully. Martel players will often play with event heavy decks, so if there's any way that you can find to control what they can play from their hand, that's often something else to think about.
Isla Raven, Chris Botley, Chris?
Yes, Triss Botley is
Triss's cousin.
Is great, yeah. Because very often, Martel players will sit back with lots of cards in hand, and a lot of those cards in hand will be events. Burning in the Sand, Vengeance for Elia, False Plans, his Viper Eyes. So be aware of that. And so, if you want to counter events being played, then there is neutral tech available as well as house-specific tech that can counter that.
And I think ultimately, sometimes you've just got to not try and do every challenge, but you've sometimes just got to hit that wall.
Yep.
And there's only going to be 3 burning on the stands. There's only going to be 3 vengeance failures.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just got to play the odds and think.
You do, because at the end of the day, Martel, other than Doran's game and Martel Wars and Ricasso, etc., they don't have the amount of renown that other houses have. So they still, even with the Wars to Come agenda, they still rely a bit on seeing the game through to maybe the mid game. So if you can kind of batten down the hatches and get through all the nasty events, eventually, as Steve said, they will run out. Unless of course they've got ways of getting things back from the discard pile to their hand, in which case that's unpleasant. But without renown on the board, Martel still struggles a bit.
And that's it. If you can hit a challenge off with maybe a couple of renown or a couple of other effects kicking off with it, and just make it worthwhile. And actually, my other bit of advice is long play the long game against Martel. Sometimes just sit there.
Yep. Yeah, because sometimes Martel they kind of rely especially their event tech that they play from hand relies on their opponent making challenges. And that can work because certain decks, like crossing decks, for example, for a crossing deck to work, they must be making challenges.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Otherwise, their agenda is null and void. But other decks like Baratheon decks, where they can just afford to sit back and not make challenges and yet still have their deck work, that can frustrate a Martel player, because a lot of the stuff that Martel players have in hand just doesn't work unless their opponent actually does stuff during the challenges phase. So Martel can be a very frustrating house to play against, but if you research the cards, maybe even play a bit of Martel yourself before switching back round to being the Martel opponent, you can know how to go about it. So, best of luck.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time tonight. Thanks for the games. And thank you for watching Uncle Cthulhu Talks. I'll be doing some more Thrones content later on. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to be doing our unboxing of the Battle for Billion box from Warlord Games. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again.
Yep.
Good night.
Cheers.
If you've got any thoughts, talk to us on Facebook, in the comments, especially about House Martel. We'd love to hear them. I'll catch you again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye for now.